matter what destination you choose, it never looks like you expect when you get there. This is Abouda at the Elephant's Graveyard. When I was 13 years old, I wanted desperately to commit suicide. After years of bullying at school and at home, of abusive violence from my family, of being an outcast, of being different, my life was pain, constant pain. And one night in my room, I sat there contemplating how I would commit suicide. And a strange thought came to me. It didn't seem strange at the time, but when you think about a 13-year-old, I decided that if I was going to extinguish all experience, if I was going to end my life and stop being, then my death had to be one of the most intense experiences I could ever imagine. So I decided to take a diving knife that I had and push it into my chest until I died. I got about a half an inch into the skin when I realized the stupidity of my decision and that this would never work. That just what I'd experienced already was too painful for my arm to continue pushing. So I gave up, collapsed in tears, and ended up falling asleep. That night, I had a dream, a vivid dream, that I've never forgotten and that I still see clearly. I am in an open wasteland. And looking at myself, I realize I'm a Buddha. Now, I don't know how I knew what that meant, but in that moment, I knew exactly what it meant to be a Buddha. But I look around me, and there are people everywhere. And I realize that each and every one of them is a Buddha, and that we all arrive sooner or later. And I woke up and felt a freedom that I'd never felt in my life. Jump ahead 20 years. I'm in Bodh Gaya, India. Bodh Gaya, for those of you that don't know, is kind of somewhere between the holiest place for Buddhas and Disneyland for Buddha. It is where the Bodhi tree is that he sat under and gained enlightenment. It is also a place where every country that has Buddhism has a temple or a stupa, some garishly bright and almost like a discotheque, some subtle like Tibetan monasteries, but they're all there, one after the other. And I'm there to participate in a 10-day silent Vipassana retreat. This is my second one. I had done one before in France when a friend of mine, early on in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, called me one day and said, "Hey, what you doing next week?" I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because I'm going to a retreat in France near Lyon, and the place is supposed to be beautiful. And I wondered if you wanted to come." And I checked with my wife, and she thought I needed a break, so I said, "Sure, why not? Let's go," having no knowledge what I was getting into. It was on the train that he told me that it was a 10-day silent meditation retreat where all you did was meditate. You could not read. You could not write. You had no utensils whatsoever. You could not look another person in the eye. And I thought, how can I get off this train and go back home? But I went. And it was an earth-shattering experience. It helped me significantly. I've practiced Vipassana meditation ever since. But that's for a different story. This time I'm in Varanasi. I'm in Bodh Gaya in India. And I'm there because ever since I was 13 years old, I'd lived a paradox. Even in my worst alcoholic days, I believed that I was supposed to be a monk. I was supposed to live a monk's life. And I was split. I was split by trying to find peace, centeredness, and to feel complete in real life, or the fact that I was supposed to leave this life. Not through suicide, but by going to a monastery and living my days out there. Interesting enough, about 5 years earlier, I'd been to a person that reads your entire astrological chart. And I mean in quite some depth, not the simple Pisces and stuff like that. I'm Aquarius, by the way. And she said to me, "You have one of the strangest charts I've ever seen. All of your planets are in diametrically opposed houses, equally split." She said, "I'm not surprised you're constantly split between the life of a monk and the life of a householder. I'm not surprised. And in fact, it's this lifetime where you're supposed to marry those two together, find peace between the two, holism between the two." But that didn't happen at that point. It didn't happen after my first meditation retreat. In fact, it was worse. I got so much out of that retreat. I felt so much peace after the years of abuse and alcoholism and drug addiction and getting sober and moving continents and everything, that I thought, this is what I'm meant to feel. This is how life is meant to be. I should do this. I should leave my family. I should leave my kids. I should go be a monk. So I went to India, to the holiest of Buddhist places, to sit a retreat for 10 days, imagining a Tibetan monastery. Arriving at the concentration camp, which was to become my home, all delusions of beautiful monasteries with light bells and all wood floors disappeared within seconds. The road that the retreat center was on was so dangerous that our entire encampment was surrounded by barbed wire. There were huge metal gates at the entrance, which you had to ring and wait to get in. The buildings were cinder block and reminded me of some prison camp in Asia in World War II. And that was to be my home for the next 10 days. I didn't know yet, but I would shortly find out that next to our encampment was a sports field that for the next 7 days we're going to have Junior Olympics with loud megaphones and screaming and chanting and things of that sort. Nor did I know that the Tibetan monks during winter come down to Bodh Gaya, and many of them sit these retreats. At first, when I found that out, I thought this was the place. I'd found my center to find peace. I had these holy men with me. This would be the most amazing week. It only took one meditation sitting to find out that that expectation was not going to be met either. Tibetan monks pass gas while meditating or do any other bodily necessity while meditating. And that may seem like a minor thing if you're in a deep meditation, but when you've been eating Indian spices and curries and so forth, and you're sitting there trying deep deeply, trying so hard to listen to your breathing and not feel the pain in your back. And then suddenly the guy in front of you lets out a fart that would rumble the walls. But better yet, 3 seconds later, you smell it. And you can't laugh and you can't do anything. You just have to sit with it as it hovers around you, waiting for the next explosion to come. I realized that this was not going to be my Shangri-La. The nights were freezing cold, and the beds were cement slabs. I'm not embarrassed to say that after the second meditation, I took 2 of the cushions and 3 blankets from the meditation hall, which you're not supposed to do, to cover my slab. We had no windows, and we had probably about 50 meters of pathway that we could walk during the days. And my back got worse and worse. All I kept focusing on was, what was I doing here? I lived in Tuscany. I had a beautiful villa, olive trees. I had my own meditation cell. Why was I here? And I couldn't come up with an answer. And on the 7th day, while I was sitting there, it suddenly struck me that I didn't have to do this here. That I could follow the monastic aspect of my life, marrying it with the familial aspect into my life, into one beautiful, beautiful Shangri-La in Tuscany. I didn't need to be schizophrenic. The point was to marry these together. And I went back and I tried just that. And for many years, I have swung more in one direction and more in the other. But this idea of monkhood, for some reason, still stuck with me. Jump forward to today. I spent the morning collecting olive wood for my fire this evening. I then went to the local well and filled up my canisters of water. After breakfast, I did my physiotherapy. I went for a long walk. And for a while just sat here mindless, staring at the nature, looking at everything around me. Knowing that later I'd cook dinner, I'd read something, and I'd go to bed. And it suddenly struck me, I am a monk. I live in the elephant's graveyard, basically, as a monk does. I contemplate. I spend time in the moment. I do my work. I have my projects. I make these recordings. And I am almost always completely in the moment. It's funny how it never looks like you expected it would. But in some ways, this almost exceeds expectations.